Great. Okay, so as people are coming in, you can have cameras on or off. Please do mute yourself. And we'll go ahead and get started since I'm showing it's 9 o'clock Eastern now. I'm really excited you guys are here. I was asked to do this by a few pre-meds that I've been advising this year in our in a group advising program called Academy. And I really thought maybe it would just be a couple. So something like 30 people signed up, more people are trickling in right now. So I'm really thrilled that there's so much interest. And I'm gonna turn on screen share for a minute. Oops, giving you a preview of the end. Okay, so welcome to Yoga Breathing for Anxiety, or we might also call it Pranayama for Premeds. So for those of you who are not familiar with me personally, my name is Rachel Grubbs. So I'm the co-founder of Mapped, which is a pre-med software service that helps you create a custom roadmap for your pre-med process and then track your progress along the way. I'm also a founder of a tiny little yoga company that consists of me called Polaris Yoga. So I've been doing test prep advising and pre-med advising for about 20 years now. I've been practicing yoga off and on since I was a teenager, but I got into yoga in earnest in 2016 and have been teaching yoga for about 2 or 3 years now. I do have official yoga certifications, so if that matters to you, I'm a registered yoga teacher with the Yoga Alliance. I went through a complete 200-hour certification, which is what is sort of the gold standard before you go teach students. My niche, I can teach all kinds of yoga, but the niche that I really love is being an introduction of yoga for people who maybe haven't felt comfortable trying it before. So for a day like today, it might be like, I don't know, I heard meditation and mindful breathing is kind of woo-woo, and she said it's for pre-med, so maybe she's going to approach it from science, which good guess I am. Or it might be that you have a certain body shape or size or skin color that has made you feel not welcome in yoga, because let's be real, a lot of yoga studios are chock full of really skinny young white women. Some of you might be skinny young white women. I still love you. There's nothing wrong with that. I just want yoga to be open to everyone. So the classes that I usually teach are very gentle. They're designed for bodies that don't get a chance to move a lot, or that are larger or older or healing. Tonight, we're going to not really do any movement. You might notice I'm sitting at my desk. That's intentional because I want you to feel like you can also do the things we're doing today right at your desk. But if you're more comfortable on the floor or lying down, in your bed, wherever you want to be is great. Oops, can someone mute themselves, please? I'll see if I can find you. Yeah, we've got a couple people who need to mute themselves. Try to do a mute all here. Okay, great. You should all be muted now. Let me go back to share screen. Tani, did you have a question? Okay, never mind. You muted yourself. Great. Okay. Yeah, please stay muted for now. You can definitely chime in with questions later if you have them. Okay, so that's a little bit about me. I do test prep. I do yoga. Today is kind of the intersection of that. So here is what our agenda is for tonight. We are going to do a little bit of not super intellectual, but slightly classroomy stuff, because I think that especially for this audience, but for a lot of people, understanding breathing works a little better if you can actually picture what it looks like in the body. So I'm not claiming to be an anatomy expert. Some of you have taken anatomy in college. Many of you are going to take more anatomy in med school. You'll pass me easily. That's great. I've studied anatomy as it relates to teaching yoga and to keeping my students safe. So I don't claim to have a huge depth of expertise. I just have this niche. We're also going to talk about how to take a complete breath, which might sound like a weird thing because you've all been breathing every moment of your lives, every year you've been alive. But many of us actually breathe backwards. And the good news is it's really easy to fix if you do that. So we're going to learn it today, how to breathe forwards, essentially. And then we're going to get to what I think is kind of the heart of the session. Again, I created this in response to some people who are taking the MCAT this weekend. So that was my inspiration, is what if I'm sitting at a Pearson Center and I'm having a little anxiety kind of rise up in me, and how can I manage it? But these tips work in a lot of situations. So, you know, could be because you're doing a presentation. This weekend's Father's Day, and often that means getting together with the family. And even when we love our families, sometimes family gatherings are stressful. So what I'm going to try to teach you tonight is some concrete practical tips that you can use really without anyone even seeing you use them, so that it's subtle and private, and yet you're kind of hacking into whatever feelings you're feeling to put your body and brain into a better set. And then we'll practice it some together. And I will be sending out the recording. I'll probably just put it on YouTube. I haven't decided, but I'll make sure you guys get a copy of this session so that if you want to do more practice later, you'll still have it. So that's our agenda. I'll pause here. Any questions or comments so far before we dive in? You can unmute or raise your hand, whatever works better. Okay, looks like you're all ready to dive in. Okay, so anatomy of breathing. You guys have seen pictures like this before. This is what the human lung and diaphragm and rib cage look like for most of us. I'm saying most of us because you might notice, so on the left side of this picture, which would be the right side for this person, there's sort of three main bronchioles. I myself only have two on the right. So I never want to dismiss people who have different abilities or, you know, different formations of bodies. You know, most of us have two on the left side because of the heart and three on the right. Your mileage may vary, but the big thing to know is all those tiny little bronchioles, you know, so it's like a tree, right? Your lungs branch out and they get into smaller and smaller branches. And at the end of them, and I'm not being very scientific here, I'm trying to encourage visualization, are essentially thousands of tiny little balloons or sponges, right? And when we breathe, all of those balloons are getting bigger. And then when we exhale, they all kind of sink. The other thing I want you to notice while you're looking at this picture is how much space the lungs take up. So this particular picture is a picture of the lungs having just exhaled. And we can tell because they're relatively high against the rib cage, right? Like they only go down to about sort of where the front of your rib cage starts to end. They're not going all the way down to the low part on the side. And the diaphragm, I think you guys can see me while looking at this picture, right? It's sort of shaped like a dome, maybe like an umbrella that's been completely opened. And when we inhale, that dome starts to push down, gets flat, and even starts to actually go the other way just a little bit. And then the lungs go all the way to the bottom of the rib cage. And that's important to know because if you feel comfortable, you can even put your hands on your own body, put your hands somewhere kind of up by your chest and touch like where your collarbone is. Your lungs are that high. And now put your hands down somewhere between your belly button and the bottom of your ribs. And when you inhale all the way, your lungs are that low, right? So that's a lot of real estate. Sometimes I pick up factoids and then I don't remember where I got them. So I'm like, I worry, like, is that true? But at some point in all of my yoga training, someone told me that if you laid out all those tiny little branches end to end, it would cover an entire tennis court, right? So there's a lot of stuff happening inside our lungs. Questions or comments here? And again, you guys might know more about anatomy than me. I'm just giving you the kind of yoga highlights. Okay, so we've thought about how big our lungs are, how much space they take up. We've seen what the diaphragm looks like when it's relaxed. Now, if you can see this little GIF or GIF, as you prefer, and this little human, now we can see what it looks like as the diaphragm is contracting and relaxing. And oops, back up, Rach, where'd you go? Okay, so again, Contracting, inhaling means the diaphragm pushes down. And exhaling is when it relaxes and goes back up. And it's kind of subtle in this picture, but as you guys are watching this inhale and exhale happen, as the diaphragm pushes down, do you notice anything else happening with this body? And you can unmute or chat, type in, whatever works better for you. I see McKenna going like that. That's right. Very good. So if you didn't see me, she was widening her hands from close together to out. So like, look at the sides of this person's body, right? You can see it's not just the chest and the ribs that are expanding. The pushing down is creating some expansion even below the rib cage. And if we were to look at this in side view, the belly would be pushing forward. So if any of you are lying down and you have your hand on your belly, you might notice the way that when you inhale, your belly goes to the ceiling. I think most of us are sitting, but again, you can probably feel it if you just put a hand somewhere around your waistline or your belly button and breathe in, you will probably notice that your hand floats just a little bit away from your spine, right? Seeing some nods. Good. Okay, so having talked about that, you kind of, very basic, quick overview of the anatomy of breathing. Now let's talk about how to take a complete breath. And I had mentioned before, there's this thing called reverse breathing. I want to start by talking about that. And here's the question I'll pose to you. How many of you have ever been asked or told, hey, suck in your breath for me? And for some reason, it's like you hear in, and you do inhale air, but then you also decide to inhale and suck in your belly. So like your chest puffs out, but your belly button is actually tightening into your spine. Has anyone ever noticed that sometimes when they inhale, they do that? I'm seeing at least one nod. Okay, so, this little, you do what you can when you're picking free graphics off the internet, right? This diagram calls that wrong. Wrong might be a little harsh. The challenge is, if you do it that way, is you're not allowing your lungs to fully expand, right? Because we just saw in the image before that the diaphragm wants to go down to let the lungs go down. But if you're trying to suck in your belly, you're not allowing the diaphragm to go down as far, so the lungs don't get to expand as much. And really importantly, what's happening then is when you breathe like the guy in the red is doing, is you're only filling the top lobes of your lungs, which one we have less of, right? Because again, most of us have 3 on the right and 2 on the left. But also shallow breathing is what we do when we're running or scared, right? So like you guys have probably noticed in your own breathing, if you're like trying to do some cardio, that it kind of sounds like, right? Like the exhales are very short because you're just trying to get in as much as you can. It's like you don't even have time for an exhale because you're just trying to suck in. So that is fine for when a tiger is chasing you. And you might be thinking, but Rachel, when I take the MCAT, it feels like a tiger is chasing me. And I know, but you can't run from the tiger for all 8 hours, right? You would exhaust yourself. Okay, good. I'm seeing some smiles. What I want you to do is to learn to breathe into your belly. And of course, you're not actually breathing in your belly. It's just kind of a directional cue, but to learn to use the full capacity of your lungs, because our bodies impact our breathing, but our breathing impacts our bodies. So if you are breathing really short, shallow breaths, it might be because you think a tiger is chasing you. But also, if you are breathing really short, shallow breaths and you're not being chased by a tiger, your body is going to think, oh, wait, this is what we do when there's a tiger there. We must need to run now, right? So just by taking short, shallow breaths, you can push your body in to a little bit more of an anxious zone. So yes, if you're nervous, you breathe shallowly, but if you breathe shallowly, you might make yourself nervous. That's the point I'm making, and that's what I want to help you get away from. So right or wrong, that seems a little extreme to me. If you're doing it the other way, you're still getting some air, you're just not getting as much as you might have otherwise. So let's go to the next slide so I can talk a little bit more about diaphragmatic breathing, or also known as belly breathing. So obviously I just showed you pictures. I know your lungs are not in your bellies. Yoga teachers love to give directional cues. I'm trying to think of a good example that works in real life. Okay, so if you were in California and you wanted to head across the country, what if you didn't know east and west, but you did know, well, I don't want to go towards the ocean, right? So you're getting on the highway and it says, take this lane for east and this for west. And actually, I just did that backwards, right? Well, I guess it looked all right on camera. So you might not know east or west, but if it said, go to the ocean or go to Las Vegas, you would be like, oh yeah, I'm going to Las Vegas, right? Like that's the right direction. So we call this belly breathing for the same reason. It's because we're trying to help you fill your lungs with air so much that you notice your belly expand. So diaphragmatic breathing is kind of the more official term, but you're going to hear, especially if you do more yoga, more meditation, you'll hear a lot of people call it belly breathing, and it's the same thing. So here's where we get a little interactive. You can see we've got this lovely person here helping us demonstrate it. I would like you, if you feel comfortable, to go back to having one hand somewhere over your heart or your pecs, and another hand somewhere around your belly button. Some of us don't feel great touching ourselves. So if this for any reason is just weird to you, just don't bother. Just focus on those parts of the body without touching. And then we're going to do this on our own pace, but I'll at least try to have you start with me. Meet me at the bottom of your next exhale when you've pushed out all your air. And now inhale through your nose if you can. Feel the air go down your throat. Feel it go into the lungs. Push all the way down. Notice your belly push out. You're not forcing it out, but you're noticing the belly's coming away from the spine. Hold for a second. Now exhale, notice the air come out of the belly and go up and out of the nose or mouth as you see fit. Okay, let that go. You can let your hands drop for a second. Sometimes breathing like that can feel weird if you're not used to breathing slow, so I don't want to make you do a bunch in a row right away. Here's a question. You don't have to answer me, but ask yourselves. As you were doing that, did you notice that the bottom hand moved a lot more than the top hand? Or did they move about the same amount? It's not a right or wrong thing. You probably notice the bottom one more because it's a lot. Like you would have to really work hard to like fill your chest, right? So probably the bottom move more, but either is okay. It's just interesting to notice. So if it feels okay to you, go back to hand on heart and hand on belly. Meet me at the bottom of your next exhale. Inhale through the nose if you can, down the throat, down to the bottom of the lungs, belly pushes out. Hold for a moment. Exhale, air goes out of the belly, up, out the nose or mouth. You might even draw in your stomach a little to push the very last bit of the air out to clear your lungs. And then let it go and inhale naturally. You can let your hands drop if you want. How's that feel to you guys? Some of you might have done this before. For some of you, this might be the first time you've ever breathed that way. You can, I don't know, give me thumbs up or downs. Give me weird faces. Okay, let's try a couple more and I'll talk less. We're going to do some anxiety management tips, but I just want to kind of get you feeling what this feels like. So hands on heart and belly. Meet me at the bottom of your next exhale. Inhale. Belly floats out, those tiny balloons expand. Exhale, belly sinks, balloons shrink. Inhale, belly fills, balloons expand. Exhale, belly sinks, balloons let the air out. Inhale. And exhale. Good. Let that go. So we've talked about the anatomy of breathing. You have now learned how to take a complete breath. I had mentioned before, some of you might be doing reverse breathing, and I had said, like, I think wrong is too harsh of a word. It's not the end of the world if you do it. It is good to fix it. And here's the really good news, because I used to do it too. It is so crazy easy to fix. If you just practice a couple of those long, slow, complete breaths with belly breathing, if you do a few breaths like that on a few different days, your body will love it and just take it back. It'll just do it automatically, because that's the way we're meant to breathe. So the body's going to get into a groove real easy. So if you notice that you sometimes breathe backwards, do not beat yourself up about it. It'll fix itself in no time. And you're still breathing either way. So let's talk about some anxiety management tips now. I want to put some of these breathing scenarios into real world events. I thought a lot about how to talk about this today, because I like to give concrete, practical examples that I think you can relate to. I also don't want to give you such convincing examples that I send you into spirals. Right? So I'm going to try to balance like how much detail. So you're like, yeah, I get it, but not so much detail that like, you're like, oh no, Rachel, now you've made me feel worse. So that's what we're going to try to balance. And the first thing I want you to consider is that you are not your thoughts. And this gets into a part of yoga that can be pretty deeply spiritual and pretty complex, because there's not a lot of science behind it, right? Like, I mean, I gave you a link from Harvard before, right? Like, it's not just yoga teachers. Lots of people agree that diaphragmatic breathing is better for you. That's been scientifically shown. Here we're going into a little bit more of something conceptual, but I'm going to try to keep it grounded in reality. So you might call it body and mind, or you might call it brain and soul. But whatever you call it, you probably have figured out that your brain thinks thoughts that are basically chemical impulses, and that you are not the thoughts that your brain thinks, right? So, and here's how you know it. Sometimes when you're thinking, you notice yourself thinking. So there is the you that is the part of your brain that thinks a thought. And then there is the you that observes the thought being thunk. Is that right? Yeah, I was like, thunk, think, thunk. So however you want to call that, is not, that might be private to you. We don't have to go there. But for today's purposes, I'm going to call the part of you that thinks thoughts in your brain automatically, and that sometimes thinks intrusive or anxious or worrying thoughts, I'm going to call her the crappy roommate that lives in your head. And here's the thing. We've probably all had roommates we've adored, and we've probably all at some point in our lives had to live with someone who was just kind of crappy to live with, right? And often I think those people that are crappy to live with don't even necessarily mean to be jerks. It's just like they're so worried and they're so tense that they don't realize that they're taking all their stuff and then putting it on you, and then you feel worse, right? So I would like you, if you're taking the MCAT or you're at some family event and people are starting to talk politics and you just can't handle it, to remember that whatever weird thought going on in your brain that's going, but what if, is not you. Right? It's just a thought. You can silence it. So again, here's where I don't want to get too realistic, but maybe you're taking the MCAT and you're trying to read a Cars passage, and you guys all know those are dense and crazy hard, and you spend your allotted time reading it, and you get to the bottom and you read the first question of the passage questions, and you realize, I have no idea what that passage said. This question does not seem to relate at all to the passage I just read. Yeah, you're nodding, because we've all been there, because that's not even just you, right? That's the AAMC having fun with you. Right? So sometimes when that happens, and it's happened to all of us, you just go, oh, that's annoying. Let me go back to the passage and see if I can find something related to the answer. And you move on. And a lot of us just do that, for the entire Cars section. And it's a grueling, but we get through it. But then every once in a while, crappy roommate decides it's time to pipe up. So then she's saying, well, What if you go back and you still can't find it? And what if now you're off time? And what if you lose so much time that you don't finish the section? And then what if you get a bad score on the MCAT and you have to retake, but it's getting to be too late in the summer? And what if I have to apply next year? And like, woo, time out, lady, right? And crappy roommate doesn't have to be a girl. I'm saying she because those are my pronouns. So I imagine her as my gender, but crappy roommate could be a he or a they or whatever, you know, it's gender fluid. So if that is happening in the middle of the MCAT, literally the first step is just to notice, well, I am not my thoughts. Just because my brain is saying this thing doesn't make it true. So, and I find, I mean, you could just tell your brain to shut up, but I find it's easier to picture it as the crappy roommate, right? So you can just tell her, look, lady, sit down, be quiet. It's not your turn, right? And because you really are in control of her, that might be enough. Just noticing and telling her, shh, she might just go to the corner and pout, and you can, you know, let her have her tantrum tomorrow. Like, you can cry later. You just can't, I'm not going to cry right now. That might be enough. Sometimes you want a little more. And what you might want is to counteract with some other thoughts that you very much are thinking, that are you. And so I want to invite you to practice this with me now. So think of something that causes anxiety for you. For a lot of you, it might be taking the MCAT, but it could be, you know, tense family situation or presentation or whatever. And think about how you could feel if you're having crappy roommate thoughts. But then think about, here's what I want to feel. Here's what I want to believe about myself in that moment. And I'll do an example for myself. So if I'm taking the MCAT and crappy roommate is going, what if we don't finish this? Then I'm going to notice her. I'm going to tell her to sit down and be quiet. And then I'm going to say to myself what I want to feel, but I'm going to say it in the present tense in a positive way, as though I've already accomplished it and it's already true. So I might say, I am competent. I am well prepared, and I'm going to crush this exam. And crappy roommate may not believe you, right? Like, woo, she loves to talk back, right? But you're not worried about her, because even if she's going, but, there's another part of your brain that totally believes you and is like, yeah, I am competent. I am well prepared. I am going to crush this test. And that's the part we're talking to right now, right? So again, I mean, this is one simple slide that says you are not your thoughts, but you can notice your thoughts. You can remember that you are not them. You can assign them this imaginary scenario of crappy roommate, tell her to be quiet. And then if you want, you can argue with her and just point out the facts. So that's what I would like you to do now. Think about that scenario, whatever scenario makes you anxious. Think about that heartfelt desire. What do you wish was true? How do you want to feel? And then make a sentence. It can be 3 words, it can be 30 words, whatever works for you. Make a sentence that you're going to say to yourself in that situation. And you know, if you're alone in a room, or I see some of you have buddies, if you're with a buddy who relates to you because they're not the crappy roommate, right? They're the great roommate. You might even want to say it out loud. You're all on mute, so I can't hear you. So either in your head or to yourselves, present tense, it's positive, it's already true. Say to yourself the thing that you want to feel, that you want to be true. It's a little woo, I know, but it works. You can say it to yourself out loud or in your head. Good. Okay, so anxiety management tip number 1, right? Your thoughts are going, but what if? Step 1 is you just notice it. Step 2 is you tell crappy roommate it's time to be quiet. And then optional step 3, if you want, is you talk back. So whatever thing you're going to say, right? So for me, it's, hey, crappy roommate, be quiet, sit in the corner. I am competent. I am well prepared, and I'm going to crush this test. And just that stopping and noticing many of us, and I think the official psychological term is intrusive thoughts. I just so prefer a crappy roommate. But so many of us, when we first start learning about intrusive thoughts, don't even realize we can talk back. Like we just think, well, my brain thought it, it must be true. But no, our brain loves to lie to us, right? So sometimes just noticing and talking back is enough that it takes you out of that weird worrying and lets you sort of reset. So that is skill number 1. Questions or comments here? Okay. So we'll do next slide. Okay, so the other thing is, and again, I'm thinking a lot about testing, hence these pictures of people at computers, is your posture impacts your breathing. And I already talked about this a little bit because I was saying this is why we don't like reverse breathing. The person in this picture who slumped over, because he's slumped like that, he is not breathing out of his low lungs. He can't, because there's no room in there for them to expand. So he's only breathing out of the top. And what did we say before? If we're anxious, we breathe shallowly, but if we breathe shallowly, we make ourselves anxious. So I find, and again, I'm not a super anxious tester, but like I can get anxious in tests. If I'm really nervous about something, with testing or work, I'm at the very front edge of my seat and I'm crouched forward, like I'm gonna run from that tiger, So if you are testing and this happens to you, the way you're probably gonna notice it is either noticing you're slumped and crouched, or maybe noticing that your head is starting to get fuzzy and you're kind of spiraling, right? So if you start to realize this is one of the most important days of my life, and for some reason I'm spacing out, and then of course, that's nerve-wracking, right? I can't space out, I don't have time, I have to take this test. That's a good moment to stop and notice yourself and check your posture, because there's a good chance that if that's happening to you, you've crunched in and you're making yourself nervous with your shallow breathing. So what I want you to do there, and you can kind of follow along with me now, depending on how you're sitting, is pick yourself up and put your bottom and your hips as far back in your chair as they possibly can go. Now I'm short. I'm in my own home desk where my feet can actually touch the floor. So I love that because now I'm grounded kind of with my bottom and my feet. If you're at Pearson, maybe your feet don't reach the floor. Maybe you're putting your feet up on the wheel thing, right? Or on a bar under the seat. The feet don't matter a ton. I like to ground with feet and bottom, but if you can only ground with bottom, that's fine. And then when you think about sitting tall, there's not a lot of magic to this, but I find it does help to think bottom up. So think about ribs coming out of the pelvis, shoulders and chest getting high, actually picking your shoulders up to your ears for a moment and then rolling them back just gently down your back like that. And now you're sitting nice and tall and you're allowing yourself a lot of breathing. And again, sometimes, it takes a long time while I'm teaching you, but in real life, it takes 2 seconds, right? So you're not losing any time at the test to do this. Sometimes just changing the posture is enough. Other times you may decide now's a good time to do 1 deep belly breath. So as long as you're here in this nice tall seat, you can, and again, your choice. In a test center, you might not want to put hand on heart and pen in belly, or you might think, I don't care, right? So your choice. So either hands on self or not. Meet me at the bottom of your next exhale. Inhale through your nose. Belly floats out. All the balloons in your lungs expand. Exhale. Balloons shrink down. Engage your belly. Push that air out. Good. Let's do it again. Inhale. And exhale. Good. Okay, so that is anxiety management tip number 2. Just check your posture. And again, I try to give you guys really concrete things that you can do sitting at a desk. So I'm keeping them simple on purpose. This is scratching the surface of what yoga can offer, but it's stuff that you can use right away. All right, so we've already done a little bit of breathwork practice, but we've got about 10 minutes remaining. What I'd like to do is about 5 minutes of some more breathwork practice, and then that'll still leave us 5 minutes for any questions or comments you guys have. So just to review, I've said it a bunch of times, but here's a different diagram because sometimes just seeing the pictures different ways helps. Always optional with the hand thing. The reason I recommend hands is one, it can be soothing, not for everyone, but it can be soothing to do that. And also it helps you notice that you're actually breathing the correct way, but the hands are always optional. And I've been saying inhale through the nose if possible. Part of why it's good to inhale through the nose is if the air is cold or hot, the nose does a good job of kind of regulating it for you. But it doesn't actually matter a ton. So if you have a stuffed up nose or allergies, or just for whatever reason, breathing into your nose doesn't do it for you, it is no big deal. The most important thing is that you're breathing. So nose or mouth, whatever works. So let's do a couple more where I'm really talking you through it, and then we'll switch to just a flowing where we're all just breathing together a little bit. So optional, hand on chest, hand on belly. Sit tall to make a lot of room for your lungs. Inhale through the nose if you can. Air goes down the throat. Fill the belly. Fill your ribs. Fill all the way to the collarbone. Hold for a moment if you can. Now exhale slowly. Push every bit out from your belly, your chest, your collarbones. Engage those belly muscles. Push every bit of air out. Good. Let it go. Take a breath on your own timing, however you want. And then meet me at the bottom of your next. Exhale. Inhale through the nose, down the throat. Balloons expand, lungs fill, diaphragm lowers, belly expands. And then exhale, belly contracts, diaphragm rises, lungs empty. Good. Again, inhale. And exhale. Inhale. And exhale. Good job. You can let that go. Breathe however you want to breathe. Let your hands fall if you want. We're going to do a few more. We still have a couple minutes. I wanted to switch to the moving page just to give you, again, I think everybody learns differently. And the nice thing about this one is if you want, you can use him as your timing. I'm going to start cueing us verbally, and then I'm going to get quiet because I want you to control your own timing. You may breathe faster or slower than I do, and it's totally fine. Everyone's breath is personal. You are kind of aiming for long, slow breaths, but what that means to you is, it varies by half seconds, seconds. So we'll do together, and then I'll get quiet, and you can either look at the picture and follow the words on the screen if you need a cue, or you can just have your eyes closed and do it on your own pace. So one more time, sit tall, hand on heart and belly. Inhale, lungs fill, diaphragm goes down. Exhale, diaphragm raises. Inhale. And exhale. I'm going to leave you in silence for a minute. Good job. All right. So that takes us to the end of tonight's workshop. There was so much I wanted to say, so many slides that I ended up having to cut to be sure this did for a 45-minute session. if you guys would be interested in more sessions like this, I'd sure love to know it. I don't want to make a bajillion slides, then have people be like, that's cool, one was good. So definitely feel free, to chime in here or shoot me emails. I mentioned at the top, but I wanted to mention again, I do, tonight's workshop was just a free one-off that I wanted to do because I know there are a lot of pre-meds with MCATs looming right now. But I do teach yoga regularly once a week, Wednesdays at 7 p.m. and it's Zoom yoga. So it would be actually on the floor. It's a floor-based class. So it's very gentle, very low key, not scary at all, not competitive at all. But if that's interesting to you, that's available. And then again, I'm open to more sessions like this if there's demand. Any questions or comments? You can type in the chat, you can unmute.
Okay, just thank you. We appreciate it.
Oh yeah, you're very welcome. Yeah, I hope it helps.
Yeah.
A lot of you have big test days in the next couple of days, so let me know if you're able to hack your nervous systems and calm them down.
I hope so.
You can do it. You just got to tell that crappy roommate,
right?
We're doing stuff right now.
I know the person in the cubicle next to me is going to be like, why is she breathing so heavy? I'm over there like,
they'll just be like, you know what? That's a good idea. I should be doing that too.
They're like, yeah, should I be breathing?
Killing it. All right. Well, if we've come to the end of questions and comments, I know sometimes after all that, people are like, I don't really want to talk. You just got me chill, and that's great. So feel free to go ahead and sign off. I will make the recording available, and I'll make sure you guys know how it's available in case you want to use it again. And yeah, keep in touch. Let me know how this works out in the real world.